wife of George II of Great Britain and Ireland, Caroline was Queen Consort. Caroline and George were a devoted couple, and Caroline was a steady and faithful companion for the king. Born on the 1st of March 1683 to Margrave John Frederick of Brandenburg-Ansbach and Eleanor Erdmuth of Saxe-Eisenach, she lost her father at 3 years old when he died of smallpox. Her mother remarried but was widowed 2 years later. Caroline's mother died in 1696, and Caroline and her brother William Frederick were sent to stay with their half-brother Margrave George Frederick II. However, George Frederick was not interested in parenting young children, so Caroline was sent to her new guardians, Frederick, Elector of Brandenburg, and his wife Sophia Charlotte. Frederick and Sophia Charlotte became King and Queen of Prussia in 1701. Caroline received an extensive education, unlike anything she had experienced before. She and Sophia Charlotte developed a strong relationship, with Caroline being treated as a surrogate daughter for the Queen. Caroline was seen as an intelligent and attractive young woman, and was a sought-after bride. A match between Archduke Charles of Austria and Caroline was proposed, but Caroline refused to convert to Catholicism, and so the marriage proposal was dropped. In 1705, Sophia Charlotte died, and this devastated the princess, leading her to sickness at times. That same year, Prince George of Hanover met Princess Caroline, and they fell in love with each other. On the 22nd of August, 1705, they were wed in Hanover. On the 20th of January 1707, Caroline gave birth to their first child, Frederick. However, by July of 1707, Caroline fell ill with smallpox and pneumonia. Her husband cared for her devotedly and caught the illness himself. They both survived. Throughout their marriage, they had 7 more children: Anne, Amelia, Caroline, George, William, Mary, and Louisa. Their marriage was a loving marriage, although George did keep mistresses. Caroline was well aware of this, and he had told her about them. Caroline was faithful to her husband, and she kept her husband's mistresses as ladies-in-waiting to keep an eye on them. In 1714, Caroline's grandmother-in-law, the Dowager Electress Sophia, died at the age of 83, and Queen Anne of Great Britain died 2 months later. Caroline's father-in-law became King George I of Great Britain. Caroline and George, along with a few of their children, travelled to England towards the end of 1714. Their eldest son and heir, Prince Frederick, remained in Hanover for the entirety of George I's reign. Shortly after George I ascended the throne, Caroline's husband was invested as Prince of Wales, and Caroline received the title Princess of Wales, the first in 200 years. As George I was divorced and had not remarried, Caroline was the highest-ranking woman in Britain. Both Caroline and George made an effort to learn the English language, the people, politics, and customs of the land. 2 separate courts developed as a result, one that was composed of the king's German courtiers and ministers, and the court of the Waleses, composed of mostly English nobles and far more popular with the British people. After the baptism of their son, William George, the couple fell out of favour with the king and were banished from the king's household. Their children remained in the care of the king. George and Caroline greatly missed their children and visited without approval of the king. Eventually, the king allowed the couple to visit their children, especially when their infant son became seriously ill. The baby died, however, causing extreme grief for the parents. In 1727, George I died and Caroline's husband became George II. Caroline became Queen Consort and their joint coronation was held on the 11th of October 1727. Caroline was close to the Prime Minister Walpole, and though George wanted to remove Walpole from office, Caroline advised her husband to retain him as the leading minister. Caroline was quite liberal in her political opinions. She supported clemency for the Jacobites, freedom of the press and freedom of speech. George and Caroline did not have a good relationship with their eldest son Frederick, Prince of Wales. Due to their poor relationship and behaviour of their son, the Regency Act of 1728 made Caroline regent when her husband was abroad in Hanover. As queen, she surrounded herself with artists, writers and intellectuals, and spent much of her time in London. As she grew older, her health began to fail. She suffered from gout in her feet and an umbilical hernia after the birth of her final child. In November 1737, Caroline was suffering from intense pain in her intestines. Part of her small intestine had poked through the hernia. Over the following days, she was bled, purged and operated on without anaesthetic, as was the custom of the day. However, her condition did not improve, and her husband refused the Prince of Wales to see the Queen, something she agreed with. On the 17th of November 1737, Caroline's strangulated bowel burst, but she lingered for 3 days before dying on the 20th of November 1737. Frederick was not invited to her funeral, which occurred on the 17th of December. Her death was mourned by both Protestants and Catholics. Her compassion and morality made her popular and helped to counteract much of the unpopularity of her husband and father-in-law.